Zach Glass here with Video Journal for Chapter 13 and BPT 110, where I'll be discussing the influence and effect the media had on my understanding of the major events that took place in 2020. I'll be starting off with the pandemic. First and foremost, the media alerted me of the outbreak in China. However, they did not discuss the severity of the outbreak at the beginning of the year in January and February. They just talked about it. I feel like either they weren't properly informed or they were choosing not to inform us properly, because I was at the ACC tournament in March sitting there with tens and thousands of people in an arena in Greensboro all day long, and the very next day it seemed like the country was shutting down. So it seems like we kind of got caught with our pants down, to turn a phrase there. Not sure if that's the media's fault or somebody else's fault. I think that they share the blame at the very least with the government or the people in charge of alerting the civilians of a pandemic headed our way. And I have a hard time believing that they didn't know it was coming, or that they didn't intentionally try to ignore it and think that it would just go away, which I think that's kind of been the policy for some people in charge even to this day. So that's neither here nor there. They did keep me updated on the pandemic in my region, and they kept me up to date with the spread of the virus, and let me know how it was affecting my local communities. They did a good job of updating people in North Carolina, at least, of Governor Cooper, his mandates, and telling us to wear masks and things like that. So that was the influence it had on me. But then once it did hit here, they did a good job of all day, everyday coverage and keeping us up to date. They still do to this present day. I know the election kind of distracted from it, but they were still keeping us up to date with the pandemic, despite what some people say that when the election was happening, the pandemic disappeared. No, it didn't disappear. The election took the forefront, obviously, because it was a very important election, but most media outlets were still, they weren't just that wasn't their only focus, as opposed to what it had been the entire summer and fall up until that point. So it didn't just disappear. It's still here, and the fact that the media didn't have nonstop, all day, everyday coverage of it didn't mean it disappeared. They still covered it if you were paying attention. The effect it had on me is I wore my mask routinely. I washed my hands more thoroughly and longer. I don't think I was, and I'm a pretty good hand washer, I thought, but there's definitely a proper way to do it, and I definitely learned that the proper way isn't that much harder, and I might not have been washing my hands the best way to do so. So I've gotten better in that since. I only went to the grocery store and to work, and I still very rarely go anywhere other than those two places. And I quarantined away from my family for a long time until you got to the point where you gotta see some family. And so far, nobody in my family except for one uncle who I have not even came into contact with has tested positive for coronavirus. So I think me and my family, because of the media's influence, have done a great job of staying apart, but still being able to keep up with each other. Positive effects it had on me is it kept me and my family safe and informed. Negative effects, me and my wife did discuss this at one point this summer, that we need to take a little break from the news cycle, because all it was pandemic related updates pretty much all summer, spring, summer, early fall, until the election really took off. And I believe that overconsumption of pandemic related coverage gave us extreme anxiety and stress, and made us more prone to panic attack type things. So we had to deal with that. We had to adjust. We had to pick and choose what pandemic related coverage we were going to digest. And it's still something to this day that, you got to do things that are good for your mental health. And I don't think sitting in front of TV watching a ticker of people dying, on the side of the screen is good for your mental health. It's good to stay updated, but it's not good to overconsume. Moving on to the election, the influence it had on me. Personally, I was not influenced by the media whatsoever this year in regards to the election. I chose not to consume any coverage intentionally. If a ad on YouTube for either one of the or any political ad on YouTube, right, left, government, state, local, I either muted it or I did my best to skip it or turn the volume down. I don't care for any of it, and I already had my mind made up about everything and who I was voting for early on. So it would have just only, harkening back to the stress levels and anxiety levels regarding pandemic related coverage, political coverage and ads and things like that. Same thing. Overconsumption, not good for your mental state. So I did my best to not be influenced at all because I didn't need any influence. And whatever I did catch kind of kept me on track with where I was. The only effect I had from the few glimpses of coverage I saw on the secondhand accounts that I would hear at work and from family of coverage was just further embarrassment for my country and more disdain for political races and the two-party system. So that was bound to happen either way. No surprise there. Every election cycle, I lose more and more faith and hope for a successfully ran, clean, fair campaign from either side. So it's like children fighting over a toy. At this point, not fun to watch. Nobody really likes to watch that. And for some reason, people get on one side and that's their sports team almost. I'm a big sports fan, but it's not the same. Me being a Carolina Hurricanes fan and not liking a Washington Capitals fan, we might not agree for 2 hours on a given day, but we can still be friends. With the political races, it's just so polarizing. It makes people hate each other, not just for 2 hours on a given day or for a month every 4 years. It's becoming nonstop, fights, hatred, and it's sad. So positive effects. I do believe that honest, accurate coverage from some outlets, the Get Out and Vote campaigns from some outlets, help this country, or from all outlets. Any Get Out and Vote campaign is good for our country. I think the more people that vote, the more of a chance this country has of turning this thing around. And I think that helped us make the right decision in this presidential election. So some of those media outlets and all the Get Out and Vote campaigns helped this country dramatically this year in this particular campaign. The negative effects, I think the media, and not all media, but I think certain outlets, and I'm not going to mention them by name, I don't think I have to, polarized and divided our country, spread rampant misinformation. These particular media outlets need to be held accountable for that. The ones that furthered the divide in our country. Millions of Americans have been fed propaganda and misinformation and are still being fed propaganda and misinformation. I know one outlet that was guilty of that is trying to reverse their course right now, and I don't think that that should make a difference. I think they need to be held accountable. I'm not saying that censorship is a good thing, but there's a line, and some of these outlets have crossed it. I know free speech is a thing, but if you're a national news source, there has to be some accountability there. Some accountability. I'm going to move on to racial unrest. The influence was I was made aware of atrocities being carried out by the police and other government agencies against minorities. I was made aware of the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement and protests around the country that took place this year. I learned more this year about racial inequality than I had in my entire life combined. So that was influence. That could also kind of be, that last sentence could be an effect, I guess. Moving on to the effects. I view my country in a different way now. I can't put it any other way than that. I'm more aware of my privileges and of systemic racism that this country was built on and still practices to this day. My eyes were opened up to the racist viewpoints of family members, people I consider friends, and coworkers. And I've been trying to learn how to deal with that. So that's an effect that, I mean, is directly and dramatically affected, or has changed my life in a lot of ways. Positives from the coverage of the racial unrest is I was able to educate myself about all these things and grow as a human being, respect others' struggles, and support equality while condemning systemic racism. I was definitely galvanized in that area. I went to protest. I was involved, and I have friends that I've made friends. I had people that were, acquaintances that I've become friends with because of this, and I have people that I was friends with that we've kind of trailed off from, and I think that's good for the country. Honestly, we were able to agree to disagree in most cases, civilly, which that's not always the case, but it did directly affect my life. The negatives, again, some media outlets propagated lies and refused to address the systemic racism problem in our country, while passing the blame on to protesters and distracting viewers from the real issues at hand. Don't need to mention the outlets by name. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. This culminated in a more divided and polarized country, and that's all I have written down here. I'm going to close it out. I know this was a long one, but a lot of these things meant a lot to me, so that's why I went a little long. In closing, the media is powerful. It has been since global and national media really took off. Less than 100 years ago is really when it really just began to grow into what it is today. It's a very powerful tool. It needs to be used responsibly, which it hasn't been in some cases. I'm not saying we need to censor people. I'm not saying every side shouldn't be represented, but I think that when it comes to blatant propaganda, passing the blame on to people without addressing the real problems at hand, and rampant misinformation that's been taking place, it's a sad state of affairs, and it needs to be rectified. And luckily, hopefully, there's more people that have grown from all of this and learned how to adjust from all of this than there has been people that have suffered. And I'm not sure if that's the case, but I hope so. I'll see you in class. Thank you.